We know it's happening, and yet it's really difficult to actually act from that place, and the sort of disconnect from knowing the reality of it and trying to get on with your everyday life without being so affected that you can't get up in the morning, because it's so cripplingly devastating when you really think about it.
We're wrecking the earth ourselves. No one else is really doing it for us. It's not just about us now, it's about the future. How long is this earth going to put up with us?
There is a widespread socially constructed silence around climate change such that the majority of people hardly ever talk about climate change from one year to the next, and for many people, we know certainly from in opinion polls, certainly about a third of people can't recall ever having a conversation with anyone about climate change. So we have a huge crisis which is regarded as being outside the bounds of what it's acceptable to think or talk about.
2 winters ago, we had the wettest ever winter on record. Adam showed a slide then of the floods in the Somerset levels. Thousands of newspaper articles published. Does anyone want to hazard a guess as to the percentage of newspaper articles that were published about those floods in the first month that even mentioned climate change? 7% of all of those newspaper articles. People are simply not really talking about the links between these things that are consistent with the projections that climate scientists make and climate change.
So my first thought in terms of what hasn't been mentioned yet is the profound influence of vested interests, profit and elite on the narratives that we are experiencing in society. Control of the message. And I think where the arts comes in, and what I'm quite excited about, is the ability of the arts in general to connect on a human level with us, to reflect our fears, to explore difficult questions, to bring humour into it.
When I was looking for footage, looking through YouTube things, and it's incredible in the comments how angry people are, and there are a lot of people who are convinced it is a con. They're convinced it's a government con to restrict their lives in some way. So they will sort of flag up some counter evidence, because of course there's lots of money being spent on counter evidence that actually, the numbers of polar bears are actually rising. It does provoke these very weird kind of responses, and you think, well, we're all in the same situation together.
Can you read them out? Let's start from the top.
AOX. It got me in my tummy. It made me feel really tense, and a really visceral response.
I was moved, and I had to question myself and my view of the world, and I could feel things evoked in me, so it definitely was working on a kind of psychological and mental, but also that heartfelt level as well.
One of the problems is that we're encouraged by our current culture to push the problem right out of mind and out of sight, the problem of the damage of our way of living is causing. And what Chodzko does is he brings that back in a visual way. He does it in a way that not only shows the physical damage to our world, but he also shows the way that our way of thinking fractures our minds, that we live in a sort of superficial way, happy and everything fine in a perfect world over here, which is sort of above reality, running above reality, and also we are increasingly deep down anxious.
It was very honest about the sort of confusion that occurs when you're thinking about these issues.
One part of the film I found really compelling was when the picture showed us the housing estate, quite a nice, pretty housing estate with the sun setting, and almost dared us to have the same reaction, that same sort of disgusted reaction to it. And that is, for me, that is a challenge, because I do think people like living in clean, beautiful spaces like this. And it's really quite easy to forget about the tar and the waste and the ice caps melting.
It doesn't matter when people don't understand climate change. It doesn't matter that it's a difficult problem ultimately, because if we decide to act on it, we can put in place policies and measures that overcome all those known cognitive problems. So my message is one, on the one hand, of concern about how people get emotional about solving the problem, But at the same time, I'm utterly convinced that that is temporary and not, in principle, unsurmountable, and that we can indeed solve the problem. We're smart enough to do that.